Hello, everybody. Today we're talking about the end of the war in Europe and a major, two major theater. And let's get started. Today our objective question is, what were the major turning points in the European theater? Now, most of the time, right, if you describe something as a turning point, right, it changes the tides. And most of the times when we talk about wars, there's one major turning point. But in this case, when we're talking about the European theater, there's two major turning points. And one is in Eastern Europe and one is in Western Europe. So let's make sure we're familiar with those two. So the major turning points in the European theater. Just to remind ourselves where we're at this point. We've got Germany and Italy in Europe as the Axis powers. We also have Japan on the other side of continental Asia. And the Axis powers, led by Germany, have controlled a majority of Europe at this point. They control all of this area. Remember that France, a member of the Allies, alongside England, the United States, and some other countries, also the USSR, right? France is actually occupied at this point by the Germans, by the Axis powers, and this is not looking good for the Allies up until this point. So the United States say, all right, fine, we're going to join, right? We were bombed by Japan. We decide to join, and we start to draw up some battle plans and stuff like this, and that's the Atlantic Charter that we looked at a few weeks ago, where we were basically going to copy and paste Woodrow Wilson's 14 points and say, okay, these are, our expectations for what the end of the war is going to look like. But now that we've officially joined, Roosevelt, FDR, and Churchill, the Prime Minister of England now at this point, get together and they say, listen, in terms of the Axis powers, yes, Italy's an issue, yes, Japan's a problem, but Germany is the leader, and if we cut the head off, the head being Germany, right, we'll be able to finally slay this beast. So Germany becomes the main priority to, accomplish. And we also push for an unconditional surrender. And this was a very important element for Churchill especially. He believed that the only way to truly defeat the Axis powers and the Nazis was to push for an unconditional surrender, which means that they're going to have, no real bargaining power when it comes to how their country is going to be treated after the war. Battle wages in the Atlantic, similar to World War I. The Germans, of course, have their U-boats that they've been using to sink ships. However, the Allies have a few ways to contradict that. We have the convoy system, basically traveling in numbers, big carpools of ships traveling the ocean together to help protect some of the larger, slower-moving vessels. We're also going to use sonar and radar to alert us to U-boats and planes, and this is going to help really cut down on the effect that the U-boats are going to have on the Allies. Also, remember that the United States is mass producing everything, and we're using a process called prefabrication to put ships together rapidly. So at its peak, we've completely eliminated automobile production, and we're able to produce 140 ships a month, which is incredible. That's a huge, huge number, which is going to officially kind of turn the tide in the Atlantic. No longer are the U-boats the ridiculous advantage they used to be. All right, first major turning point in the European theater, specifically Eastern Europe, and that is the Battle of Stalingrad. All right, so Hitler wants to capture a lot of the oil and stuff that exists in a particular city called Stalingrad. This is a very important city. He also really wants to take it because it's named after Stalin, and he believes this would be a real kind of mental blow to the Germans the Russians if he's able to take it. So the Germans continue to fight, attempting to overtake Stalingrad from the Soviets. 99% of all of Stalingrad is leveled to the ground and absolutely destroyed with them trying to take this over. This gets reduced to basically hand-to-hand combat. We're literally brawling in the streets over turf at this point. Once again, the Soviets, there's just too many of them. Hitler doesn't stand a chance in terms of just the sheer numbers. because even if the Nazis managed to kill 1,000 Soviets every day, there's 2,000 more showing up every single day. So, one, the brutal winter is once again going to be a big issue for the Nazis. Two, the ridiculous amount of Soviets that are available to fight. You can kill 100 and they keep showing up. And then also Hitler's refusal to retreat. He absolutely did not want to pull out without any success, but it eventually becomes necessary. It's also the most deadly battle. Look at every single battle that's ever happened on the face of this earth between people. The most amount of people died in the Battle of Stalingrad. Over 1 million people are going to die. This also includes quite a bit of civilian casualties. A lot of individuals who lived in Stalingrad are going to flee. But the thing about the Soviet Union is that, towns and cities and stuff are so spread out, and it's so cold at this point of the year that, thousands and thousands of people flee to the nearest city and end up perishing along the way. So between military and civilian casualties, it's going to be the most deadly battle in human history. Here's some pictures. We see a lot of destruction, rubble, just stuff completely destroyed, right? Not good. Not good. Here are the thousands of people fleeing. A lot of those people will die along the way. Oh, yep, there they are. Didn't make it. If you have access to the PowerPoint, this is a great little clip that shows you some fighting in the streets of Stalingrad. Also, what we have going on, we're trying to, weaken the Axis powers wherever we can. We decided to open up a second front. Remember, we've talked a lot about how having a two-front war, how having to fight a two-front war is a downside. Opening up a two-front war against an enemy is an advantage, and that's exactly what we start to do. We start to take over and fight for occupied areas of Africa, which the Allies are very successful. Dwight D. Eisenhower gained some notoriety there, which is going to kind of set him up to take control of the next major thing we're going to look at in just a moment. All right. Next, as we start to move closer and closer, so now we've retaken Africa, we're moving up closer and closer to Europe. The Nazis have also been pushed back in Stalingrad, and now they're moving westward as well. If I had a map, I'd be showing it to you, right? We're closing in on continental Europe at this point. We decide that the easiest way to kind of penetrate Europe at this point is going to be looking for the weakest link. And we decide that weakest link is in Italy. Refer to it as a soft underbelly. It's where we think we're going to be most able to have a successful landing, to penetrate deeper, and to actually start taking over some of the stuff that exists there. Luckily for the Allies, upon arriving in Italy, a lot of the Italians are actually going to team up with us and fight against the Axis powers, particularly the fascist Italians. This helps us gain control. We end up capturing and then killing Mussolini. So remember that the totalitarian fascist leader of Italy is going to be killed by his own people during World War II, and now we have control over Italy. Here is Mussolini, some of his top advisors, and his mistress hung up in the square to die. Cool. So now we've got Italy. That was kind of easier than we thought. But now here comes the really, really hard part. We need to get France back. We need to liberate France and move into Germany. And we're going to do this through an attack called D-Day, codenamed Operation Overlord. This is how the Allies are going to get back into France, back into major, Europe, all right? And like Northern Europe, obviously. Okay, so we're going to compile a ridiculous amount of landing crafts, amphibious vehicles, planes, troops, and we're going to cross the English Channel and storm the beaches of Normandy. This is on the northern coast of France. Once again, I wish I had a map, but alas, I do not. June 6th, 1944. This is going to be the largest land-sea air operation we're ever going to see so far. And lots of people are going to die D-Day on both sides. This is planned and executed by Dwight D. Eisenhower, as I mentioned earlier. I wish I had time to tell you all the cool stuff about Eisenhower, but more on that later. And after D-Day is successful, right, we storm the beaches, we finally take hold, we were able to catch the Germans by surprise, Oh, there's so much cool stuff to tell you. So anyway, we surprised the Germans. We had them thinking we were going to go at a completely different time. Even though there was a storm coming, we had decided to attack. We were successful. Lots of people died, but we were successful. And now we have our foothold in Northern Europe. So this is the other major turning point in the European theater. The first one, Stalingrad, that turns the Nazis back on the Eastern Front, right? Forces them to begin to move westward back towards Germany. Then we penetrate through Italy, and now they're being chased. And now here the main is the D-Day invasion. The Allies are able to gain a foothold in France. That's a great little kind of phrase, right? A foothold in France. And this is going to force the Germans to evacuate France. They leave. The Allies gain control over France, and now they're fleeing eastward back towards Germany. So they're literally just being closed in on all sides, getting closer and closer to the heart of Italy and Berlin. Here are the beaches. Oh, so much cool stuff. This is a great clip if you have access to the PowerPoint from Saving Private Ryan. Really cool. You've probably seen it. Really great movie, but this scene is really good at kind of building the visual of what exactly is going down and how dangerous it really was. Here are the Allies marching the German POWs out of Paris. Here are the Parisians, right? Welcoming U.S. soldiers, saying thank you for saving us. Right? Here's de Gaulle leading the victory parade. Oh, look how great this is. Also, meanwhile, FDR is going to be elected to a 4th term. He's the one and only president in U.S. history to serve more than 2, and now he's just been elected to his 4th term. Now, so long story short, he had a vice president, right? 2 terms. Then he had Henry Walls. What's his name? Henry Walls. I was right. Henry Walls was his 2nd vice president for his 3rd term, right? But now that we're going to elect him for a 4th term, the Democrats were kind of getting worried because FDR was really old and he was very sick. He was ill. And not to be, a Debbie Downer, right? But we were pretty sure that FDR was probably not going to make it the next 4 years. So if he is elected for a 4th term, we need to have someone in the vice presidency that we know we can rely on because they will probably end up becoming vice president. And a lot of people didn't like Henry Wallace. They thought he had a lot of communist leanings and they were afraid to go for that. So instead, at the very, very last minute, they say, hey, FDR, who do you want to be your vice president? He says, Henry Wallace, of course. And they say, no, nice try. It's this guy, Harry Truman. And FDR says, who is that? And they say, don't worry about it, old man. Get on up there. So FDR wins, and his new vice president is a man named Harry Truman. That'll become important later. Battle of the Bulge, last major German offensive. It is the last chance for the Germans to kind of push back, to take the offensive and to actually outwardly attack instead of retreating. They file all of their remaining energy, all of their remaining manpower into this, and while it is momentarily successful, they're not able to sustain that and they end up pushing back. So Battle of the Bulge, last major German offensive campaign. It's called the Bulge because they bulged out, but then immediately sucked right back in. Battle of the Bulge. Also, of course, remember that the Allies are as they're moving closer and closer into the heart of the German Empire, as they're now crossing through Poland. The Soviets are crossing through Poland. They're discovering all of these death camps that the Germans had set up. We talked about that yesterday. And now, as Hitler understands that the end is getting closer and closer, the Soviets are now in Berlin. Hitler realizes his time is here, so he takes a bunch of his friends and his girlfriend. He marries her at the last second, and they go into his bunker, and he and his basically girlfriend, they got married a couple hours before, and his wife commits suicide in the bunker, which means Hitler's done. He is dead. He turns over power and control of the Nazi party to a few of his, close collaborators or whatever. They eventually, very, very quickly, soon after, surrender. And the Allies have won. They've defeated the Nazis. So the 8th of May is VE Day, which stands for Victory in Europe. Eisenhower's the one who accepts the unconditional surrender, and the Allies have won in Europe. There we go. Cool. Nazi plunder. After the Nazi surrender, we get to discover a bunch of the stuff they stole. Cool, cool, cool. Here's a diagram of Hitler's bunker. If you're feeling bored, go and Google Hitler's suicide. Look up some Wikipedia pages. There's some pretty interesting stuff there that I unfortunately don't have time to show you. Oh, last thing. Oh my gosh. Okay. 7 future presidents are going to fight in World War II, and it's going to affect their viewpoint on war. I'm not going to have time to tell you. We'll start.